皆さんこんにちは、アーサーです。英語の本読みたいけれど難しすぎて途中で諦めてしまった経験はありませんか？自分のレベルに合った簡単な本を選びなさいとよく言われるのですが、実はこれ大きな間違いなんです。最近 IU-Connect 卒業した生徒さんたちからもよくこういうこと聞かれます。朝、外国人と楽しく会話できるようになったんですけど、英語の本読めるようになるにはどうしたらいい？どの本をどう読んだら上達するの？そこで今日は僕が日本語を勉強していた時に発見した本当に効果的な読書方法をシェアしたいと思います。この方法を使えば難しい本でも自然と読めるようになります。しかも辞書を引く回数も減って読書が楽しくなります。そして最終的には調べなくても気軽に読める自分になります。それでは一緒に見てみましょう。よろしくお願いします。First, let me share the problem with level appropriate books. Most English teachers tell you to pick books according to your level, right? They have these simple versions of famous books called readers. But I don't agree with that approach, and let me tell you why. When I was learning Japanese, I bought a lot of these readers. You know the type, it was Japanese on one side, English on the other side, and at the bottom they had useful vocabulary lists to help you read. I read those readers from cover to cover, sometimes more than once. And do you know what happened?My reading skills did not improve at all. Now, you might be thinking, どうして？だって日本語で本読んでたでしょ？ And that's exactly what I thought too. But here's the problem. I actually wasn't really interested in those stories. And this is where it gets interesting. You see, books are about communication. They're about sharing messages. Think about it this way. It's exactly like having a conversation, except the information flows only one way. In a conversation, you say something, the other person says something. But in a book, the writer sends a message to you, from the writer to you. And here's the key for communication. Communication happens when you actually want to know something, right? When you want to get some information.But if there's no information you want to get, well, then there's no real communication happening. In a conversation, if you don't want to know anything, you don't ask questions, there's no conversation. And that's exactly what was happening with those Japanese books. I was reading them, not because I wanted to read them, but because I wanted to practice reading Japanese.So my mind was in what I call study mode, 学習モード. I wasn't really communicating with the author. I was just practicing, focusing on the Japanese. Now, you might be thinking, でも朝、練習すれば上達するよね? And sure, practice is important. But when your brain knows you're just practicing when you're in 学習モード, it doesn't engage the same way as when you really want to know something. So in that case, what really improved my reading? It was when I started picking books that I actually wanted to read. Books that even if they were in my language, I would still want to read them. The problem is, a lot of the books we would want to read are actually kind of difficult.And if they're not that famous, there won't be a reader about them. So even if we can't read very well, how do we read a difficult book like this? Well, the key is to address it, to attack it according to our level. And that's the method that I developed to help me really be able to read books in Japanese.So the first step is to pick an English book that you'd actually be interested in. Now, what if you can't find a good book? I know for me, it was really difficult to find Japanese books that I would be interested in. So I want to make a deal with you. If you leave a comment below this video telling me the type of books you like to read in Japanese,I will leave a comment and give you some suggestions of books for you to read. And maybe you can use that to improve your English reading. Okay, so now you have a book you're actually excited about. Now, what's the next step? So the first thing you need to do is get the paper version of the book. You can use Kindle or an ebook if you really want to, but for this method, paper feels more effective. Because here's what we're going to do. We're going to go through each chapter or section 3 times, but each time in a slightly different way. Now, you might be thinking, how much should I read at once? Well, it depends on how you feel. I recommend no more than 1 chapter at a time. But you know what? According to your level, you can do 10 pages, 3 pages, or even just 2 pages. It's completely up to you. I recommend starting with a much shorter amount than you think, and then slowly build up to longer sections. Okay, now let me show you how exactly this works using 2 books that really influenced me. One is called Ikikata by Inamori Kazuo, and the other one is called Kirawareru Yuki right here. So we're going to go through the 3 passes looking at these books. Okay, so for the first pass, you're going to read a section from the beginning to the end. And here's the important part. Your goal isn't to understand everything completely. Your goal is just to read through the chapter and feel like you're making progress. Now, what happens when you come across a word you don't know? Like, for example, if I didn't know the word naimen, well, if it doesn't seem important, you can just skip it. But if you think that that's important, you can underline it just like this. Look, you can actually see where I did this in Kirawareru Yuki in the past right here. You see there's 1, 2, 3, 4 underlines of words that I didn't know. Now let me show you with Ikikata too. So let me just break out Ikikata so you can see what that looks like here. So here we have the Ikikata lines here. Now, here's the thing. Ikikata has so many good lines that I also underlined sentences that impacted me. But these shorter lines here, well, those are words that I did not understand. Now, here's the important part. What we want to do is not try to understand everything. We don't want to look it up. You see these words that I wrote here in the underlines? I did not look those up. We're not trying to understand everything right now. We're just reading through it. And it's okay if you understand only 20%. That's perfectly fine. You just keep on reading until you finish and reach the end of the section. Just like that. And if you're like most people, like me, then when you finish, you'll have a section with lots of underlines. Now, I'll be honest with you. At first, this is going to feel really uncomfortable. It definitely did for me. When I first started practicing reading Japanese, I was looking up every single word I didn't know. Every single word. And I was trying to remember everything. And do you know what happened? Well, I was trying to read a book by Natsume Soseki, and it took me 1 hour to read 2 pages. 1 hour for 2 pages. Yeah, that didn't last very long. Because here's what happens when we check every single word. We stop too much, we lose our rhythm, and most importantly, we lose our motivation. And that's why the first pass is just about going from beginning to end, and you underline the words you don't know, but you don't think too deeply about them yet. All right, so after you finish the first pass, now it's time for the second pass. Here, you go back to the beginning of your section and you read the same section again. And this is where it gets interesting. When you get to an underlined word, you might realize, oh wait, I understand what this means now. Because if the word was important to the chapter, you could probably figure it out from the context. But if you still don't know what it means, now is the time to look it up. So you can close your book and you can look up the word. So you check the word in a dictionary. You find the meaning and the pronunciation. And then this is the important part. You don't just look it up. What you do is you write the meaning and the word in the margins, just like I wrote here. Here's a line that I have here. I have up here, ogori takaburu, right? And down here, I have the word 驚異的に, just like that, right? Now, you might wonder, why not just use a digital dictionary or why write it down? Well, this is exactly why I recommend a paper book. The act of handwriting makes a much stronger connection in your mind than typing. It really helps you remember better. Now, here's the key thing that's really, really important to focus on. You want to write in the margins down here, not on the specific lines. Well, why is that? Well, if you write the word next to the line, then when you look back on it, your mind will stop thinking and look to that word, and you'll go back into gakushu mode again. The key thing is to place it in the margins far away from where you're actually reading it so that you can choose to look at it or not. Let's look at Kirawaru Yuki too. So just to recap, you read the same section again, just like in this book, and you write the key word in the margin. So if it's down at the bottom, just like here, if the word is down at the bottom, you can write it in the margins at the top. Or if it's near the top, you can write the word down in the margins, just like that. That's the best thing to do. And remember, in the second pass, you're actually reading the section again, not just checking the underlined words. We're reading, we're having communication with the author. If you just focus on the underlined words, your brain goes into gakushu mode. We want to experience the text while we go through this. Okay, now after you finish the second pass, now comes the third and final pass. Now, in the third pass, you're going to read the same section as you did 2 times before. So this is going to be the third time we look through this section. Now, here's the difference. When you come to an underlined word and you don't know what it means, you don't use the dictionary. You look at your own notes in the margin. You look here. And this is what is really cool about this. By this time, it's your third time, so you probably know quite a few of the words already, and you might not need to look at your notes as much as you think. But even if you do need to check your notes a lot, that's okay. Remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about learning through real communication. So once you finish the third pass of your section, what do? It's simple. You move on to the next section. Now, I know what you're thinking, but Arthur, what if there are still words I don't understand? And that's okay. We don't need perfection. We need communication. The more you use this method, the more you communicate, the more naturally you improve your reading. Those words you don't know, you'll see them again in other chapters, and eventually they'll stick. It's really just like learning how to ride a bike. You don't need to be perfect from the beginning, right? In fact, if you try to be perfect from the beginning, you'll never actually get on the bike, right? You'll be too scared of falling. And it's exactly the same with English. At first, it's gonna feel like you're making lots of mistakes. You might think, my English is terrible. I don't understand anything. And that's completely normal. I felt exactly the same way studying Japanese. But here's what happens when you keep using this method. You naturally absorb more English than you realize. Your brain is working even when you don't realize it. And then one day, you'll be reading and suddenly you'll realize, wait, I didn't have to look up a single word. Wait, I understood almost everything on this page. And that's when you know it's working. OK, まとめに入りましょう。1、ポイントは自分が本当に読みたい本を選ぶことです。レベルに合わせる必要はありません。2、 1回目読むときは理解できなくても最後まで読むことが大事です。わからない単語は線を引くだけで大丈夫です。3、もう1回読んで線を引いた単語を見てもわからないときに意味を調べて空白に書いておきます。4、もう1回読んで線を引いた単語の意味がわからなくても空白のノートを確認しながら最後まで読むこと。完璧を目指さずコミュニケーションを大切にしましょう。自転車と同じで練習していれば自然に上達します。今回はいつもと違う内容だったんですけど、少しでも励みになったらとても嬉しいです。ちなみにもしあなたが今の英語学習方法に達成感を感じてないのであれば、僕の世界とつながるメソッドがお役に立てるかもしれません。あえて英語を勉強しないで自転車みたいに実際に使いながら英語力が自然と身につくちょっと変わったメソッドですね。僕自身と数百人の僕の生徒が実際に話せるようになって外国人と友達になった。海外に移住できた。仕事で外国人のお客さんと気軽に話せるようになって人生が劇的に変わりました。詳細は無料動画講座でシェアしていますので、興味のある方はぜひこちらをクリックするか、概要欄にあるリンクをクリックするか、こちらの QR コードをタップしてください。As always, enjoy your English adventures and これからも一緒に世界とつながりましょう。See you next time. Bye.